So, a very warm welcome to our third live exploration of attachment-informed EMDR and our part of our five-parter. And we have a new configuration. Olga, привет. Познакомься с моей женой, Юта. Мы встретились в Москве, может, 50 лет тому назад. Она работала в Москве, и я тоже. Это очень романтическая история. Right, so the background here is not virtual. This is real. I mean, the astonishing thing is I am literally sitting in the proof. I'm actually literally, that's Jamie Marrich's book, literally sitting in Rotem's office in Denver, Colorado. And Jutta is in our hotel. It's not been feeling quite so well, so it's not come along. Jutta, do you want to just say hello? This is so Stuart and Olga and Rebecca are old friends from our first three sessions, and Jamie has caught up and is with us. Just say a word or two, Jutta.
Hello, everybody. I'm here in person, also virtually here in a hotel, but I'm here in person in America, which is a big thing. And it's lovely that you guys are interested in Mark's work, because I'm biased, but even if I weren't biased, I think it's absolutely phenomenal what he teaches. And I've worked...
I do pay her well.
And I've worked in this way. I've taken a lot of the ideas, of course, go back to the transpersonal training that we shared, that we both had a long time ago. So it's a beautiful combination of the EMDR structured way of working, but the richness of the transpersonal therapy. And you could include the CBT, Socratic questioning thing, and NLP, and it's quite a big thing. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you can take from it the things that will enrich your practice from this training. And I find the structured way of working is incredibly incisive.
And that's what we're focusing on today.
The client work, and that's what the focus is today. So I hope you enjoyed that.
Great. So Jutta facilitates on our workshops, and has been a central part of the journey, especially over the last 11 years since we got back together again after a brief interlude of 13 years divorced, as one does. Meg, nice to have you back. Warm welcome. Jamie is new to you.
And I did want to I was actually about to type into the chat. I have a sick child at home right now, and that's why I'm a few minutes late. I was running back and forth between being mom and therapist, and I have to step out one last time. I just wanted to check in because I was already 5 minutes late. I'm going to step out for 1 second, put myself on mute, and turn off my video, and then I'll be right back.
Okay, Meg. See you shortly. So, yes, I was just saying, Jutta, you haven't actually personally met. I mean, we're sitting in the same town now, but you haven't met Rotem in person. But there's Rotem sitting upstairs here, literally straight above me here. So that's great. Rebecca and Jamie and Stuart, just remind us where you're all sitting, so that Jutta and Jamie know where we are geographically positioned in the world.
I'm in California, about 35 minutes from San Francisco.
North or south? I did north of San Francisco, aren't you?
Kind of east.
So,
okay. Yeah. So, and I was born and raised in San Francisco, and I love that you use the Golden Gate Bridge for your work.
It's our sort of shared patrimony, or a shared inheritance, isn't it? With Shapiro, the founding myth of EMDR is solidly based in San Francisco, so it seemed like a good metaphor to use. Stuart, you're in...
I'm in not so sunny South Wales in the UK, unlike everybody else. But I would say I made the mistake of buying an electric bike from a zero electric motorbike from California, which never rains in California, does it?
See, it doesn't work in the Welsh rain, is it? What you're telling us?
That was the point. Sorry, I'm not very precise, was it? Shut the bugger up.
Well, I could bridge you from that. Jamie, as the newbie on the blog, where are you sitting?
I'm next to you. I'm in Boise, Idaho.
In Boise. I was going to come and do an in-person workshop in Boise in 2020, which fell apart because of COVID, needless to say. So,
Yeah, that
yeah.
interrupted a lot of things. Yeah, I wanted to come over to Denver, but it just didn't work this weekend.
Oh,
So
sorry to miss you here.
doing this instead.
Right.
It's okay.
And Meg, remind us where you are physically sitting.
Yes, I am located just outside of Denver, Colorado. I'm in a suburb, Thornton.
Yeah. Okay. So just a few miles from us. And Olga, you're in St. Petersburg. Wonderful St. Petersburg.
No, today I am on my vacation in Turkey, not
In
far
Turkey?
from, yes, not far from Antalya.
Lovely part of the world. It's also a bit nicer in September than it is in July and August. It's very hot in July and August in Turkey.
Yeah.
So, Joachim, a couple of words from you, seeing as this is all your fault.
This is all my fault. I admit my fault. I had an interesting, I shared with Mark. So Mark and I first in person for the first time yesterday, and I shared that I have a client. So yesterday I had a day full of clients, and I used the attachment informed EMDR framework with a client I've been working with for a while, doing EMDR for a while, and I feel like we just landed on what we need to work on, and the client agreed with me. So and that client, unlike many of my other clients, is very spiritual. So it was very natural to do the resource team. So we started with that. And just to give you a kind of background, this is the second time that I'm taking this course. So as a host, but the second time, but I decided to just do it this time, and we really landed on what we need to work on. It was very clear to the client, and it was very clear to me. So again, I asked Mark in our first live session, how do you unlearn? Because this is the hardest thing. I am so conditioned to do the standard protocol. And then, so I kept kind of repeating in my head, image, emotion, body, belief, image, emotion, body, belief, image, emotion, body, belief, because I'm so conditioned to have the negative cognition right after the image. It's just like my, doing it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But it really, really worked. So I just wanted to share that. I want to encourage other people to, not just take a training, but like just implement what you learn from the training in your work, even if it feels unnatural because you've done this standard protocol, I don't know how many hundreds of or even thousands of times.
There is a real tension, which I struggle with, and in the UK community in particular, we struggle fairly openly with it. There's a tension between saying, well, this is totally in conformity with the standard protocol, which I think we have to say it's the right thing to say, and also, how we understand the standard protocol, and then also to say, however, especially in phase 3, that bit, which sort of, I remember doing my basic training 20 years ago, and thinking really for a couple of years before the lights went on, that EMDR is NCPC, VOC, emotion, sides, body, that everything else is secondary, and that EMDR is all about getting that order right and getting the right cognition and making sure they're all in the same domains and so on, as if everything else is sort of secondary, and that's EMDR. But actually, that's just a part of, it's one way of doing, if you like, the full standard protocol. It's been sort of raised into a kind of religious, formula that's sort of put on an altar, and you've got to do it because Shapiro said so. Jamie, before we go any further, and what I'd love to hear from you all is, how are you doing with your clients? Are you beginning to, like Rota, to use the thing, and how are you finding it? Clunky, or amazing, terrible?
It feels pretty natural
for
me. I started reading Laurel Parnell's stuff a long time ago too, when I think when I first started the EMDR training, and so I find like you, it just flows more naturally. That whole bouncing back and forth between right brain and left brain is clunky. It's hard to get a PC. It derails the session. I like this way of flowing. It's good to hear it from another trainer, that it's okay to work in that way. But I've been using her resourcing for the nurturing and wise figures and protective figures. I've been doing that for, I think, as long as I've been doing EMDR. So that all feels pretty natural to me. But like you, I've had trouble with the like ideal mother, perfect mother kind of interweaves that Laurel will use. And so I like your way of doing this. I've really appreciated learning your way of bridging. Some of that specific language and scripting that you've given us is really helpful. So anyway, that's kind of my overview.
Great, that's really helpful, because as I keep saying, I mean, Laurel is inspirational, and watching her work, and what I've done, for better or worse, is to distill it right down into, you know, much clearer structure and language and so on.
Really helpful.
And, yeah, super. And it is, Jutta and I were saying this morning, the thing is, so many trainings that one goes on, you sort of hear that and it sort of wafts over a little bit, I think, and then you go back, you carry on working basically the same way you were working before, just perhaps with a little bit different, little bit here and there. But this sort of distills, it's like sort of concentrate of EMDR. It's a very alchemical process. Christian, lovely to see you. A warm hello. Where are you? You're walking. You're walking for real. Christian, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen him work online before, he's always walking, but he usually walks on a sort of trainer thing in an office. But now you're doing it for real.
No, I teach a class in the social work department, so the quarter started. So I'll be at my desk in like 30 minutes when I drive home.
Okay, well, you're very welcome in whatever manner you can be with us. Jamie is new today, but otherwise everybody's an old friend, so you know everybody else. Oh, because you don't know Jutta yet. Jutta, on your screen, is my partner, and we've known each other for 50 years, and we work together in EMDR. We've been on a bit of a journey, which I occasionally refer to. So we were just checking in, Christian, on, so difficult not to call you Christian. So we've got a mixture there of Tristan and Christian. We're just checking in on, and Jamie was saying how valuable it's been to have the specific wording and structure of this way of working, sort of distilling the Parnellian way, which Jamie's seen everything that we've recorded so far, so she's up to speed, but is very used to working in a Parnellian way, and has found it just saying nice things about the structure and the focus of this particular distillation. So I was just saying that how many of you know about alchemy, the principles of alchemy? Meg, you know a bit about alchemy? Have you actually literally turned lead into gold? No, it's all right. But have you metaphorically turned lead into gold regularly? It's what we do with clients, isn't it? They come in with lead, with heavy black stuff, and we turn it into gold. I mean, take that as a metaphor. And Jutta and I were steeped in the transpersonal way of working in the college we studied at in London, and the metaphor of alchemy was sort of central to our understanding. And the transmutation from, I didn't put it in the recordings that you've watched, but the transmutation, I don't think I did even, the transmutation of lead through its various stages, you know, nigredo, rubedo, all the sort of medieval alchemists had these terms for the process. They were trying to create real gold out of real lead. Needless to say, didn't get too far with that. But they developed the beginnings of chemistry, as it happens, I think, the various stages of the process through, and Jung picked it up as a metaphor big time and wrote about it and got very enthusiastic about it. But the distillatio, the distillation, putting the black stuff into the crucible, heating it up, and you get this essence coming off, the spirit, which is an interesting word. Spirit, my God, I remember drinking 98% pure alcohol in Moscow as a student. It was bad news. The Russians and spirit are bad news, as Olga will know well. But you get the essence of it coming off. And I think psychotherapy is a bit like that. And in a sense, EMDR gives us the constituent bits that you put into the container. It's this sealed alchemical container, which you then heat up with your Bunsen burner. You power it up with the bilateral stimulation, and you get an essence coming off, the truth, the centerpiece of what the story is about. The self, if you like, which as Dick Schwartz would call it in IFS. So there we go. That's a bit of metaphor and metaphysics and transpersonal. But how are people doing on the front line with your clients? Rotom's had a good experience. Anybody like to share triumphs, disasters in actually doing it? Stuart, the floor is yours.
And shut me up. Shut the bugger up as necessary.
I could bridge you from that, Stuart.
Okay. But I've tried to ask it because I've been using it. I've used it with about 4 clients now. Let me put the hand down. 3, a couple of long-term ones, 1 medium-term, and 1 brand new one that started this week. So it's all very and works really well. I think a couple of things I've found are that it's interesting how people choose their I've been using the resource, particularly the resource team, because in the past I've done it very clunky individually, but I've been using it. That's been really good. It's going really fast. It's amazing. But it's the differences in people's approach to it. I've got a new client who just started, who's got depression. He's got EMDR, but he's PTSD, but he's very motivated. He's done a lot of stuff for us, and he's very imaginative. And first session, I just took some background, and he was so keen and gone so far. I thought, well, let's put the safe place and whatever, and the resource team in. And he just went in like that, and he decided he wanted 1 person for both. He had a fox for the for both teams, so I let him have that.
Yeah. But you did 3 + 3 + 1, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he wanted to double up. He wanted to double up the fox.
That's fine. If somebody
and
wants
that's on the first session. And he also,
I only let them have 1. Generally, I only let people have 1 figure that crosses both nurturing and protective.
Oh, it's only 1.
If you have too many, you can just
he was a nurturing protector. So he was, and with that's first session, and he came up with a clearly a pivotal moment. It was only the first session though, so I was reluctant to bridge back from it because I hadn't done any resourcing then. But he was amazing. That he was just. But am I right to just hold back a bit because it's the first session and not go into that? What do you think?
I think in the first session,
because that's the first thing he came up with.
Yeah, what I have done, and what I do occasionally do in the first session is, actually, to be honest, Stuart, I tend to hold to keep the horse trotting. Don't go into a gallop in the first session.
No, I don't know. I very rarely do that. But he just came with such a pivotal. I didn't go with it.
What I would do is I would set out what we're going to do.
Right.
But in principle, on the whole, and I do sometimes, I sometimes do a full-on first session. I have been known to do that. But on the whole, I will set it out and slow it down, especially if somebody is coming into the work, urgently needing and possibly slightly over controlling and taking the space and squeezing you out. And the danger is if you cooperate or go down that track, you could be reinforcing an old dysfunctional way of being in the world. So just be careful.
Yes,
but
I didn't go with it, but I was just amazed that I got one in the first. So I've left it. I've noted it and left it once.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds good. What I not infrequently do in the first session is what I call a psychoeducational bridge.
Right.
So somebody comes in and says, well, I don't know what this is about. I'm having a terrible time, and I get triggered or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I say, well, can we just want to try something? Can I just try something? And I'll do a cold bridge. I won't tell them what I'm going to do.
Okay.
But when there's something quite live in that first session, I'll do let's say you're my client. You come in and you keep saying, shut me up or whatever, so you're doing something quite intense in the transference.
Right.
You know, you're doing a number, you're doing a Stuart number. I can clock straight away, hello, here's an old friend. You know, and the truth is, when clients come into the work, and tell me if anybody disagrees with this, tell me now. I think, you know, you wouldn't be here doing this training. I'm not allowed to call it training, by the way, it's CPD. In the UK, you're not allowed to call this training, would you believe? Anyway, that's another story. I'm pretty certain that you're all experienced, you're passionate about what you do. And when a client comes in, you know pretty quickly, hello, I think I've got a sense of what this is about. Not just left brain, but they do something, the way they talk, the way their urgency, or their looking away, or just their whole body language. You think, I've got a sort of sense of deep down what is being acted out here. How many of you today, I'm going to expose you terribly, Stuart, but I think I'm getting to know you well enough that we can trust each other to play a bit with this. Okay. How many of you noticed Stuart's urgency with his invitation to me to shut him up? You're smiling knowingly, Jamie. Did you clock that?
Well, sure. And Mark, how many times have you said, shut the buggers up, don't let him talk too much?
True.
You kind of primed him for it.
Yes,
but
yes. I honestly felt so, I wasn't sure I wanted to say yes, that I noticed that. I felt like, oh, I have a hard time calling that out when I don't know a client very well. I like that you called that right out.
I could probably bridge you, Meg, from your caution. And Meg, I mean, I'm getting to know you as well. I'm afraid to say I take no prisoners. And I run, as I've said, the department of leaping conclusions. And for every single one of you, I'm afraid to say, you know, you could bridge me from saying I'm afraid to say, because I'm packaging it. For every single one of you, I've already got, not intellectually, I'm not putting you into an Andrew Leeds style sort of diagnosis. Rotem and I were talking about Andrew Leeds earlier today. But I've got a felt sense of what your story is. And I mean, you're all reasonably functional, would hope. But if you were clients coming into the work, I would already know, and I'm sort of tempted to say about each of you, but I think perhaps I won't, because I might get into terrible trouble. But I've already got a sense from each of you, probably what the formative stories are. Jamie less so, because we haven't really getting to know each other, and therefore sort of where we might want to end up. So let's say Stuart comes into, is it okay, can I just play with you a little bit?
Oh, by all means. Can I just, I'm not, it isn't defense. There was two things that my reason, whatever the fuss saying, is that there were quite a few clients I've tried it with, and there isn't time for everybody to listen to them all. That was what it was. I was trying to focus on not take too much time up, because there's so many, because there are
Stuart, you know, bless you. We all signal our way of being in the world with every single thing we say and do, our tone of voice, our facial expression, our body language. And, you know, we need to do this in group, because otherwise, you know, somebody's full of themselves, they'll take all the space. So I'm not saying that your way of being in the group is in any way wrong. Or inappropriate, not in the slightest. But I did pick up a tiny bit of urgency, and I suspect that if you and I were doing individual therapy and it was just the two of us, you would still be quite keen to make sure that I didn't think you were taking up too much space, or compromising the space that, you know, I'm the therapist, I'm the expert, or whatever, you know, just my assumption. Can you role play? Let's just roll. Can you role play for this one? And let's just assume
that's me. Okay.
All of you will have had clients who come in and you pick up very quickly that there's an edge running, that there's a story running. What I might say, this is just to illustrate what I call the psychoeducation. You know, we're setting up, it's preparation, it's trauma history, it's phase 1 and phase 2. Excuse me. You know, it's on the 8-phase protocol, it's phase 1 and phase 2. You're getting a sense, and Laurel Parnell makes this point quite often, by the way, in her trainings, that really phase 1 and phase 2 are often together. It isn't sort of phase one and then phase two. In how you get a sense of your client, which you can call trauma history. I mean, it's just, who are they? What's their story? How, what are they bringing? Why are they in therapy? And then the preparation phase. Of course, you are preparing at the same time as you're getting the story. Getting the story is part of the preparation and the building of the relationship. So in phase two, in classic EMDR standard protocol, one of the things that we do in phase two, and it's really important to do, is to explain what EMDR is and sort of how it works. So before you start doing something, we're getting their frontal cortex on side. This is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it. EMDR, bilateral stimulation, orienting response, REM sleep, trauma sits in the system. It's as if it's all the things we say. And then what I also say is one of the things that we're going to do, tools that we've got in this way of we're using EMDR is the thing that we call the bridge. And that's a really powerful way of getting into the stories that want to be addressed, rewired, why you're here. So let's say Stuart is coming with a dramatic version of what I perhaps inappropriately was picking up. And so I'd say, do you know what, Stuart, just right now, I'll just show you sort of what we do. And then I'll do a quick bridge. So I'll say, don't do this actually for real, Stuart, but don't close your eyes. But I'd say, Stuart, just close your eyes. Right now, I may be right, I may be wrong, but I've sensed that there was coming into the. Oh, I know. Actually, no. Hang on. It's relatively rare that in the first session I'll pick up behavior in the transference. Let's be fair, because that could put a client in a very, very awkward sort of judged position. Really got to be careful to do that. But they'll be bringing something that's live in the now. And I might say, if I were to ask you, what brings you here in this moment, what might that be? And they might say, like your client, they're live and ready to go. So, well, I'm not going to do it now, but let me just show you what we're going to do. And then you do a quick bridge. What's the picture that goes with that? What are you feeling? Looking at the picture, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling? What's the belief about yourself that goes with that? I mean, not as fast as that, you do it properly, but you're doing it as an illustration and drop back in time. So you're not dropping too deep into the relational dance, but you're sort of acknowledging and validating their enthusiasm.
Yes.
Like, this is where we're going to go.
Yes.
But next session.
Yeah. Okay.
And I wouldn't tap in the resources in the first session.
I wouldn't. I've never done that. But it's just, this guy had clearly made huge progress because he's been on the waiting list for 2 months. Right. He's made lots of progress with various things like his drinking, with his with a lot of the aspects of his health, and used other techniques to help him come up. So and when I first explained it, before I take a client on, I probably ask for whatever, but I just give them a brief explain. I gave them the psycho ed to start with, what it's about, how it works. So they've had that before they actually come in. Yeah. And I actually sometimes, I've got to the habit, I know, call it right or wrong, when they've had that, and this isn't an EMDR, I know, of saying, okay, so you know about it, and you've heard, well, from what you've heard now, how confident are you that EMDR will be able to help you? Okay. And actually, they usually come up sometimes with 7 or an 8. Gosh,
they're really trusting you. Good.
No, it's
Can I just stretch it out a little bit? Yeah. Go on. So other because I do want to get in today to the structure and focus of, once we get across, what do we do on the other side and how do we get back? Our first two meetings have been about setting everything up, then target identification, resourcing target identification. Now today really is particularly phase 4 and session structure. So just sort of honoring what Stuart's, because you're beginning to use it, how are people beginning to sort of adjust your practice of EMDR with some of these ideas, because it is a whole way of, it is a whole new structure, if you like, giving a much clearer frame to what I think, you know, I do argue this is the standard protocol, but with a much clearer understanding of what I'm going to be doing, why and when. Meg, how are you doing? Are you getting into the work?
Yeah,
In this way?
I've started using it. I've done it with, I was trying to remember if it was either for sure, 2 different clients now I've used this with. And these are
Yeah.
clients I've been seeing. One I've been seeing for about 1.5 years, and one I've seen since my practice started about 4 years ago.
Great.
Both of these are clients that I do weekly IFS informed EMDR with. And so we're really like talking to the parts and kind of befriending those parts. And so what we did during session was we did some resource team building. And for these 2 particular clients that I did this with, it felt very much like what Jamie was saying, is that it was very seamless transition for me, the way that I work with EMDR already.
Right.
Kind of the creativity within that structure of the 8 phases. I cannot tell you the last time that I did all 8 phases, and I definitely can't tell you the last time I did them in that order. That's not the way EMDR works. I don't finish a target in one session. I'm coming back to phase 4 over and over and over again. So the idea that we go 1 to 8 just doesn't work for me. So anyways, this flow has been great. What the clients and I have done is that we discussed some of their parts that we had already kind of healed and befriended. And we discussed if there was maybe some relational or attachment issues with the client and their part, actually. And they said, yes, these parts feel like we can't trust you to take care of us. And my client said, well, I feel like I can't trust them to take care of me either. And so we built like a resource team with some of we call them the selfiest parts. That's like
as the self, as in the IFS language.
And so we were able to create nurture, a protector, and nurturers, protectors, and a wise figure. I tapped them in individually, did them as a team, and by the end of the session, both clients were like, wow, I feel like we really can be friends. Like I really do understand where these parts are coming from.
Did you go into any specific formative moments, you know, with bridging into the stories?
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. That is where we started. They were sharing, what was your question?
Hello, Jennifer. Just to say hello to Jennifer. Jennifer, are you with us for the first time? I think you might be. Are you with us for the first time?
Second time.
Second time, my apologies.
Yes. No,
you weren't
okay.
with us last time. You were here with the first time. Is that right?
Yes, I was there the first time. I didn't get to make it last time.
Great. Did you catch up on the recording and the material in part 2?
Yes, I did.
And we have Jamie with us today for the first time, but she's very much up to speed with all the recordings, so that's great. Meg is just we're just exploring. My question to everybody is, how are you beginning to use this in your practice, and sort of what challenges and experiences you're beginning to get? And Meg is quite excited, I think, quite gratified, working in an IFS informed way with parts, befriending parts. And she was just saying that some of the parts didn't really trust the grown-ups, as it were, I guess, you know, therapist and client, grown-up client, to be able to do the work. So Meg has just done some good work with the resource team, sort of building a new basis. My question was just going to be, as you came, Jennifer, on the targets that you got into. So did you bridge into or get into a root experience of what sort of age were you in, and how did you wrap the session up? Because today is all about when we're in there, across the bridge, over the other side of the Golden Gate, what do we do? And how do we get back to 2024? How do we get back to the future?
So it did start with a childhood memory. This particular part that this client and I are working on is their ADHD part. And they feel a lot of resistance around their ADHD part, particularly like a lot of childhood neglect. They feel misunderstood, they feel shamed, they feel all kinds of things. And so something present day was coming up at their job that was really triggering some of these ADHD parts. And as we started to talk to the ADHD part and learn about their origin story, I asked, what is the picture or the image that comes up for you?
Did you have a clear, good moment anchored in space and time in the here and now?
Yeah,
Excellent.
that came up as soon as I asked that.
Great.
Because the clear moment in time started with the present day work situation. And then we said, okay, where does that part start? What's its origin story? And he said, oh, there was this moment when I was at the table and my mom started shaming me.
Can I pause you? Can I pause you,
Yep.
Meg? This actually illustrates an incredibly important point that I invite you to. You don't have to, but what I find extraordinarily effective about bridging in the way that I teach it is that whatever, some clients, especially when you're used to working with them, with parts language or with a structure that you might have been using for some time. And sometimes clients who are ready to do the work will immediately go there. They will say, I know exactly where this goes. And, it reminds me of when my mother was shaming me. One big request to you all is do the bridge anyway. Do the bridge anyway, and do it the way, I'm sounding as dogmatic as all the other sort of folk in the EMDR community whose dogma I'm trying to challenge. You're saying, don't be dogmatic. But the thing is, this actually goes back, Stuart, to your point as well. You're at the enthusiasm of your client. The brilliance of slowing it down to do the bridge in this way, it's quite extraordinary how often when you pause and let's slow the train down. We'll do the parts, whatever, but just do it clean. So you're talking to the part that's, you're passionate about IFS. That's great, Meg. And it melds very well with the EMDR. But the challenge is when we've got another way of working, at this point, my invitation to you all, and do come back to me, let's just, is to slow things down and say, right, what we're talking about, how this manifests in your life in the here and now, and then do it this way. What's the moment, the picture that captures the moment? Stay with that. And if they say, I know it's my mother, shaming me, or whatever, just say, yeah, okay, great. We may well go there. But right now, stay with the here and now. And you slow the pace down. You slow them down. You're also establishing a clear understanding that you are the driver of this car, this time machine. You're the driver. You know how the controls work. Because a client might grab the controls and want to do it, to rush ahead. Again and again, I've found the value of slowing it down. What's the picture? What's the picture just with every single client right now? What's the picture that goes with that? Whether you're working with a countertransferential moment, feeling in the moment, a shape or whatever, stuff we've looked at already. What are you feeling? Where's that happening in your body? What's the belief about yourself? Just step by step, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, drop back in time, go back as far as you can, first place you land. Often, Meg, you'll find yourself to the side of the story that the client thinks that it's going to go into. And what's brilliant about this, and I think, Rotom, that's probably what you had the experience of when you were doing this with your client, it will take you into the impact of the event. It will take you right into the formative story. And often it's not traumatic. It's not mum necessarily. It might be something that looks much more benign. But that then is a brilliant portal from which to explore. It's a kind of base. You've landed at Everest Base Camp from which to climb the mountain. But the base camp has to be rock solid. It's your reference point. Meg, to everybody, Rebecca, is this making sense to you?
Yeah, and I do want to say that maybe I didn't explain it very well, but I do
Yeah.
feel like I did that with the client because I
Great.
feel like that picture that they gave me, I did, well, I didn't ask for that word picture. I said, what's the origin story? That's the
Yeah, but you
language
see,
that
but as soon as you
client
ask,
is
but
using.
Meg, that's why I'm catching you at this point.
Uh-huh.
You know, forgive me, I mean, bridge me for seeking forgiveness to do this, but that's sort of what I'm encouraging you to do different.
Okay.
And as Rotem said, you know, how do you unlearn your previous way of working? Now, I'm inviting you, I'm afraid, Meg, to unlearn at these critical points some of your passionately held IFS approach. Because in the moment that you ask, what is the origin story, you've lost it. Can you see that? You've lost the energy of the moment.
I can, and I do feel that like so much of my personality as a therapist comes from the language that the client and I find together. And so while I really appreciate the point that you are making about using those words, that's something I'm going to really think about for my own self of whether or not I want to, whether or not I want to adopt
Give it a go. Give it a
go.
my
I will.
invitation
Absolutely.
to
I will be open-minded.
experiment. In fact, what you could do, this would be an invitation to you all in a moment like this. You know, don't do it because I tell you to, or because this is the only way to do it. But what I invite you to do is, having done this training, this training, this CPT, this event, this thing we're doing, whatever you call it, you could, if you've got the appropriate client, say, can I just experiment with something? Right, there's two ways we could do this. Is everybody with me on this one? Because I think this could be a really useful learning for everybody. An invitation to you, you know, when you would do this normally, that's the way, that's the language you build with your clients. Great, fantastic. You know, Meg, I'm sure it's fantastically effective. But inviting you just for a moment, not to unlearn, but to note that this is what I would usually do. And you say to your client, do you know, can I just try something? And just be very, very collaborative with the client. Can I just try something? Can I just experiment with some different kind of wording to the way we usually work? Now, you've told what I would normally do, what I've just done is say, oh, what's the origin story? And you've said absolutely clearly, it's mum shaming me and so on. We've got that in the bank. You know, we've got that clear. I've made a note. Maybe that's where we start. Can I just try something different? So right in the here and now, and then do it my way and see if it lands in the same place.
I like that. I really like that. Thank you. I will try that. Appreciate
It may, but it may not. And my invitation to you all, and based on my experience, is often doing it, slowing it down and doing it this way, you land deeper because it absolutely bypasses the left brain. Whereas if you ask, what's the origin story, it's still really working in the left brain. Does that make, how's this landing with everybody? I really struggle with, you know, this, what can be experienced as, you know, you're telling us not to be dogmatic and you're being dogmatic.
No, I had raised my hand because I wanted to ask about that. It seems like you're doing a shift from left brain to right brain, because left brain is about telling a story and having language, where right brain is more the image and the felt sense.
That's it. That's exactly it.
And gets more, like you're saying, gets deeper into that formative experience rather than like a current adult understanding of what happened into a felt experience of it. Is that right?
Absolutely right. And that's why the silent memories protocol that Derek Farrell tested and found equally effective to the standard protocol with Yazidi women. That's why the blind to therapist protocol doesn't do any cognitions or any numbers at all. It doesn't, you know, just does emotion and body. Image, you know, which is a Q word, you just have you agree a word that stands for it. Image and body, you know, emotions and body, and that's it. You start processing. So so much of EMDR, that's why I hate the word float back, you know, because and think about the first time, you know, as soon as you do that, the left brain is kicked in. And my concern, Meg, is in the IFS approach. As soon as you say, what's the origin story? Left brain. You know, you could do great work. I'm not saying you
No,
won't
it
do
absolutely makes
fantastic
sense.
work.
It definitely makes sense. I absolutely hear the connection, and I am
Great.
more than open to trying the
Great.
invitation. That's why I'm here. If it wasn't open to it, I wouldn't be here. So I will definitely
Super.
report back and let you know how it goes.
Okay, so have I handled that little challenge reasonably well? You could bridge me from my urgency to check with that I'm landing okay. But is that okay so far? Let's just check. I want to give everybody a space just to share questions and challenges and triumphs. Rebecca, can I come to you next? And then perhaps to Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to get to the point of like, okay, when we start, you know, last week I shared a CC. So then this following session, where do I start? How do we do that?
Yep.
And then towards the end, like getting back over the bridge, like how do you do that more seamlessly? You know, I tried it out with several
How did
clients.
it
go? With some, it's like, you know, like it says in the training modules, you have to be aware of the time because you have to leave time to get back on the other side. I think I'm reading my notes on CC. I don't think I got back to the other side of the bridge on this last session.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about just enough juice, as it were, what you were exploring on the far side? And I might be able to have a thought about how you could have got back over in time for the end of the session.
So I didn't know how to start the session, but I remembered you said to use the split screen technique of past and present. What's the same? What's different?
I wouldn't use that at the start of a session, but you can use that to wrap up a session, is to get back over the bridge without being too clunky.
Okay, yeah, see, so I started with that.
No, you wouldn't start a session with a split screen.
Okay. And then so she automatically went with, so, okay, what's different? So mainly me. So she was saying, I'm my own caregiver. My parents were my caregivers and how they neglected.
Take us, just build up a little bit. So what did you started with? What was the presenting issue in the here and now?
Oh, okay, so the here and now was, remember, like being in her room, very overwhelmed, tension.
It's the one we were talking about, yeah.
Yeah, and then bridge back to the past, being in a room, chaos around.
This is the 27-year-old who's still living with her parents. And so just so for those of you who weren't up to speed with this, Jennifer and Jamie. Oh, of course you've seen the recording, so you are up to speed. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, okay. So you went back, yes, right. You went back to the childhood experience of all the noise around, yeah.
Yes. And so I said, well, what's different now? Well, mainly me, I'm my own caregiver.
Yeah, yeah, that's so to catch you there, don't do a split screen at the beginning. So the way you get going is to, you know, as if for real, you've turned up outside the childhood home and you just get going. What's the picture? You know, what's the moment? You in that room. Have you got a picture?
Oh, okay.
What are you feeling? It's the same. Remember, it's exactly the same. Picture, emotion, body, belief.
Okay, I missed
like
that.
this mantra. This is the mantra. It's exactly the same. This is the nice thing about the sort of easy thing, if you like, the clear thing about this way of working. It's actually a very simply structured on each side of the bridge. The only difference is that you don't tap on this side and then you do the bridge. But image, emotion, body, belief, you capture that moment and you do exactly the same on the far side of the bridge. Image, emotion, body, belief, go. Start processing. So how did it go then? So you processed.
Well, I was surprised when we got to the past, back into the past, she automatically brought her resources in on her own.
Right. And how did you respond to that?
She said, I said, well, what did they need?
Okay, can you just pause you there, Rebecca? These are really useful teaching points. So no worries, you know, we're all learning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I didn't even know where to begin.
So,
and
I hate to say,
this.
I'll put it to the group. You know, this is not a judgment or a criticism, but what did Rebecca do wrong? So let's be blunt.
Yeah.
So what was the key thing that Rebecca missed? You know, it's very typical. Don't worry, you're in very, very good company as you're getting the hang of this thing. But so just as you've heard Rebecca tell the story, she's done a good bridge. She's back in there. She's started working on it. And she says that very quickly the client brought in the resources on her own.
I think you've talked before about like rescuing too quickly, and she's self-rescuing, right, with her resources, but it's too fast. She's not really exploring and feeling what's happened.
That's exactly it. That is so important. And I do, you know, as I think I said in the slides that you will have seen for today, you know, there must be space for the child ego state, which is holding, I mean, parts, Meg, you know, in your language, this would be the various parts that came into being to manage the situation. You know, in IFS terms, you've got very clear separate parts. You've got the exiled parts, you've got the part that steps in that manages, you've got the protector part, all of them, they're all of the age, you know, they're the 7 to 5-year-old. You really want to hear, above all, the story as experienced for real by the vulnerable child, by the actual child. So, you know, this is, you almost want to ask the protector parts, and if you're using parts language, which I don't at this point, you want to really bring the attention as if for real to that little kid having a crap time. You know, that's why I talk about the policeman, the social worker, the two adults. It's you, Rebecca, and your adult client going in there. When somebody, this is such a useful teaching point, learning point. When a client who is used to self-rescuing, because that's what they've done all their life, you know, they're on their own, nobody else is going to look after me, so I'm going to look after myself. And they're doing the same. They're bringing in the resource figures, right? Let's fix this straight away. Whoa, hang on a moment. What I suggest you do is to be with compassion and kindness and say, do you know what? Let's call her Mary. Do you know what, Mary? Or Maria? Let's call her Maria. Can we just pause? Can we ask your resource figures, your team, great that they're there, but can we ask them just for a moment to stand back a little bit, to leave space for little Maria to tell us a story? And you had to call me out a bit on, we were talking about it this morning. You know, I talk about performing as the therapist, get with the prosody and how you relate, how you dance with the client in the moment. It's not a performance. It's so important to just to slow things down, to use the kindness of your voice, the relational. You're being very relationally present to that child, and you're sort of in charge. You as therapists have got. Am I making sense to everybody? You as therapist, Rebecca, in this bedroom, you've all turned up. It's a bit crowded in that bedroom, but you've got, in a sense, you as the therapist, the adult therapist, the driver of the car. You've got the adult client who's taken us there, who's known how to get there. You've got all the resource figures. You've got probably some members of the family making a hell of a noise around. A huge amount going on. Really, what you're wanting to do is to say to the whole cast of characters, this drama that's going on the stage, there's all kind of mayhem happening on the stage. Whoa, slow down, guys. Let's just pause. The focus is on little Maria. Hey, kid, what's going on? What are you getting? Slow right down. And parts, Meg, I would say all the parts. Whoa, stand back, guys. I wouldn't call this an exile part. This is the real deal. This is little Maria for real. Do you see what I mean, Rebecca? And then when you've got that, Can
I ask a question about that?
Yes,
Mark?
do, Jamie. Yeah.
So little Cece in this example,
Cece,
her real life, right, is
Thank you for reminding me.
surrounded by chaos and overwhelmed by it,
Yeah.
and struggling to live in that environment, both in the past and in the present situation, right? I'm wondering, I totally appreciate this idea of slowing down and giving her attention and compassion. I'm wondering if it might flood her to
Well,
be with
you
that
want to
so
you want to
intensely.
flood it. It's exactly what you want to do.
You want that
Because
to happen.
you're
Okay.
slowing it down so that the client can actually feel full on, you know, the emotions, the experiences, the bodily sensation, you know, the somatic impact of what actually happened. Because the child ego state is going to communicate the experience primarily through emotion and body sensations. You know, the emotion, you absolutely want to flood the, you know, you want to, because now you're safe. You know, the thing is, you've come back. This is a story that is no longer happening, but it feels like it's happening. So you want the full on technicolor experience of the emotional impact of being overwhelmed by everything, and then having the response of having to look after myself. So little Cece is still doing exactly what she did when she was 7 or 5. Remind how
like
old,
3.
Rebecca? 3, yeah. So, you know, as if for real, hey kid, you know, it's double. You're present and you're listening. But of course, the adult CC has got the language now to articulate what little CC 3 couldn't. So this is where the left brain is putting into words the experience of the 3-year-old from within, both observing it, dual attention, both in the experience and outside the experience, observing it. And actually, Rebecca, the thing is here, when you're right in there, can you all feel we're right in the story? This is a root formative experience. You know, it doesn't actually go much deeper. So you could do a little bit of videoing. I'm just curious, or curiosity interweave. And, you know, I hope you sort of got some of the interweaves that I took you through. My favorite is the video interweave and the curiosity interweave are my 2 absolute favorite go-tos. I'm just curious, Cece, because you're talking to the adult, remembering on behalf of the child, you know, what happened next? And all this chaos going around. I mean, when that door opened, what happened? Stop, stop, stop. You know, mummy came in and sort of shouted at me, or whatever it was, or I was left on my own, or whatever it is, you're right in there. And you probably only need about 5-8 minutes because you got it. Once that story has been communicated and felt and communicated, then you tipping point. Then you switch. So don't switch too early. So Jutta and I, again, were talking about this morning, that for years, I would do these live demo sessions and work with clients for real. And it's only relatively recently, within the last year, I thought, hang on a moment, what am I doing there? Why is it working? And I realized that at every single session that I was doing on a workshop, there was a point where I stopped, where I switched gear from reveal to rewire and repair. And that tipping point, be very conscious at what point you're tipping. As soon as you bring in the resource figures, you're already into repair. You're into fixing. Do you see what I mean? You might use the resource figures maybe to facilitate the telling of the story just briefly, but stay with the story until it's absolutely clear that it's been felt as well as and communicated. Does that make sense, Rebecca? Then you see, then you can say, okay, so what does the kid need? I mean, in a sense, it's quite quick then, because it's blindingly obvious what the kid needs. You know, who can do that? Would like to imagine it. And then how does that feel now? Let's go back to, you know, the kid in the room. How's she doing? You know, how's little Cece doing? Does it feel, you know, does it feel different? Usually. And then you can say, I tell you what, you know, you can say, do you want to, you know, little Cece, what would you like to happen now? Should we bring you back into 2024? You know, big Cece, I feel like looking after little Cece. You know what you did then, you know, you can now. So you can now care for that 3-year-old in the appropriate, adaptive, kind, tolerating way, not fixing way.
Okay, so to go back, when we start the session, you go back to the past experience and start with all over again with the image, emotion.
No. Okay, so when you go across, once you're across in the story, you're in the bedroom. That's your portal, your reference point, H3. It's a very, very good place for EMDR, for effective EMDR. You process, remember, out, round, and back. You remember that sort of pedaling that I talk about? Just following the story. You might do a video interweave. Let's have a look. And then when in doubt, back to target. And the target, with you in just a second, Rota, the target is little girl in the bedroom. That's your reference point for that session.
Mm-hmm.
So you come back, you don't need to fire it up, image, emotion, but once you've
just
started,
the first time, though. Yeah.
When you're on the far side of the bridge, image, emotion, body, belief, you're in. You don't need to do that ever again in that session.
Okay. Yeah.
You don't need to do it on that target ever again, even if you come back to that target the following week. You don't fire it all up again. You're in. You've done that bit already. You've made the notes, and you can refer back to your notes. Make sense?
Okay, so then when you start the second set, like this one, start the second session, I'm gonna tell her what her image, emotion, body, belief from the
there's
last
just two
session
things. First of all, we want to get back over the bridge. You want to wrap it up. So little CC as you get it now, with with the processing that's happened, with the understanding, little CC, remembering little CC in the bedroom. Is there any distress left? This is your surge check. The question there is there any distress left? That's Laura Parnell. It's a brilliant way of checking, not sort of on a scale of 0 to 10, but just, is there any distress left? No, it feels okay now. Often it happens, if it's metabolized, the client will very often say, that seems okay now. And and then you do the PC. So
because for her, when we went back, she was still at a 4. So it's 4.
How high was it when you started?
Out of 4.
It was 4 both times.
When we started, I said, okay, going back to the past experience in, at grandpa's house, what's the level of disturbance now? And she said 4. Feeling alone, misguided, lonely.
Okay. That's after you've done the fixing, the way you did it. Was that after bringing in the resource figures and so on?
Yeah, well, because she brought in her resource figures, and then it landed still like in. She said that then the dragon part came in, and I'm feeling motivated. So she was in the present. So then I wanted to bring her back to the past.
Yeah, when you bring her back to the thing, it's because you. I hope you're all getting this, because it's very. I mean, thank you for bringing this to us, because it illustrates how important it is to allow the space for the processing to happen without the fixing, because otherwise you go back to it and it hasn't actually shifted.
Yeah.
And if you'd stayed with it, actually, Rotem, do you want to come in at this point, because this is I hope illustrating for everybody how challenging and how important it is to work with the story we've landed in the sort of the appropriate steps, as it were. And it's better to show it with an illustration, with a session, with a live session, than it is to just think about the theory. Rotev, you've got.
Well, I had a question from before, but now as I hear you speak and I'm thinking, I also know that, the client that I shared, we knew exactly that we had no doubt that we landed on what we needed to land on because of all the work we've done so far. And there was a common theme. So just to give you a little background, the client is feeling like people can basically, client is in her early 40s, and she feels like people can manipulate her, people can tell her what she needs to do in life, and she just doesn't have the ability to say no. And as we were processing things in the past, her sister keeps coming up. And what we landed on yesterday with, using this approach was a memory with her sister from age 4 that she never brought up before. So we knew, so I'm just thinking that if this was a relatively new client, I don't know if I would have such confidence that we got to this is where, and the client agreed with me. We talked about it toward the end. I shared with you, Mark, that this is a client that I see every Wednesday. One week we meet for 1 hour and we talk, and then the next week we'll meet for 2 hours and we'll do reprocessing. And but at the end of reprocessing session, we talked and we agreed that this is what kept coming up, because her sister kept coming up in all the other targets that we were working on. So this is just kind of reflection on that. But I want to go back to your conversation with Rebecca earlier with I think the word flooding is a charged word for many of us, especially, like in EMDR training, and flooding and dissociation and getting people, when I hear the word flooding, I'm thinking, is the person out of the window of tolerance and is it going to be effective? So I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on that, Mark, because
good point. I don't want to. We don't want to activate. We don't want. Sorry, I probably didn't phrase that terribly well. We don't want our clients to flood, but what we do want is for the intensity of their experience to come to the surface and be felt and shared. But the brilliance of this way of working is that we go then. Something intense comes up and we go back to that key moment. We're only working on that little kid in the room in that one moment. Whatever else is coming up, if it's getting a little bit big, we go back to that little kid, because it's as if for real, we want that kid to tell us what it's like in that story, however much other stuff is coming up. And there's also a signature difference in this way of working to standard protocol, in the sense that we go back to target much more explicitly, much more proactively, because we're containing any flooding, we're channeling it by coming back to that one little kid, age 3, in the bedroom, in that specific moment. Your turn.
Yeah, I just wanted, I don't know whether it's helpful, but what we need from what needs to happen when the client is in the child space, they need to experience the emotions and the physiological experience of the time. So it's not flooding to overwhelm them, but it is giving them a chance to allow themselves to feel what at the time they needed to put aside or repress, or whatever word you want to use for that. So there was no space for them to be how they needed authentically to be. And this is all about the clients. If you've heard Gabor Mate, it's all about the client's authentic experience, rather than having to be sensible or whatever else. And there needs to be, in the session now, there needs to be the space for them for that. And the resource figure can be there or doesn't have to be there. That you can negotiate in the moment. If they've brought a resource figure up, that's fine, they're being witnessed.
Being witnessed, yes, you can use resource figures to witness things, but not fix
it. It can be, and sometimes, if they have a dog or so, then I say, would it be okay to cry your tears into the fur of the dog or the cat if they have a pet, and that's often very helpful. That's exactly the kind of thing that they would have done as a child if they'd had the chance. So the witnessing of and being alongside the client in their child experience, that is really, really helpful.
I mean, that is
space needs to be there. That space needs to be there, because only if they've lived through, if they've cycled through their emotional experience, will the shift in the in the towards a positive adaptive information processing, only then will the perspective change that, okay, I was a little child, and fair enough that I felt what I felt, and it'll get normalized rather than.
But it also releases, it breaks the spell. It sort of, it lances the emotional boil that got sort of stuck at the time. Stuart, just 1 second. I often get feedback from my supervision groups about my time management, and sometimes people end the session feeling slightly sore that they didn't get their moment in the sun, as it were, and bring their issue. So, Rebecca, can we move on? It's such a good example of the importance of the discipline around the structure, which is what today is all about, because I've got it in the framework. But it comes back to what Rotem says about sort of having the discipline and letting go of old ways of doing and trying this new way. The key thing I'd just like to leave you with perhaps here, in order to get back over the bridge, the key points are when you shift gear. So don't shift gear too quickly. When you shift gear, remember you're shifting gear on that one moment. Having explored out, round and back, it's on that one moment that is the focus of that piece of processing in that session. Each big session of this kind of work has one key moment. The one you land in may be a stepping stone, it may be a portal. You may not be immediately into a root formative experience, but you've got one moment, and you get that one moment down with your video interweaves and so on, and you switch gear in enough time to be able to say, that little kid, how's she doing now? I don't use is there any distress left? Only use that question if you're pretty certain that there isn't any. If you have a sense that the story is still running, this is a very, very important point that I've never made before. Ask the question, how's the kid doing? How's little Cece doing? How is she now? Has it shifted? Does it feel a bit different? If you have a sense it's not done, does it feel a bit different at least? How are you, also perhaps loving eyes, like when you look at little Cece having that experience, do you feel different about it? You could be slightly innovative there. You play with it, Rebecca. And then you tap in, should we just tap that difference in? Is there a phrase around this that might be, I'm beginning to get this, something like that. Tap that in gently. It's not fixed. And then you could say, right, we're going to need to carry on working because goodness me, there's a hell of a lot of your childhood is like this. This is just one moment. And do you know what, Cece? Why don't we just give you the opportunity to sweep that little kid with your team up in your arms, look after her, be aware of her in the next week, and we'll pick it up where we left off. Can you see what we're doing? And that's you bringing it back. And then if you come back now to where we started, and you're going to go back home, you're still living at home, does it feel a tiny little bit different? You with me, Rebecca? Can you all see what I'm doing there? I'm just, cashing in whatever we can cash in interest. The interest rate is only, 0.5% at the moment, but we're cashing in the 0.5%, the 3 cents of interest that you earned on that piece of work. Just put it in the bank so that it's there when we come back next week. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Right. I hope that's been useful to everybody. Thank you, Rebecca. And forgive me for getting the name and calling her Maria. That's my bad. Stuart, you had your hand up.
Just very quick. Meant to be very quick.
I'll let you be quick.
Who's in charge of the resource team?
Say again?
Who's in charge of the resource team?
That's a good question. It's never been asked before. I've never thought it like that before. I don't have anybody in charge of the resource team. In charge, but I guess it's just a leading question. It's the adult self.
Okay, but what I'm saying, you've given them this resource team nice and early, and this person's actually chosen to use it on that occasion. You didn't ask them to use the resource team; they used it. But you're saying hold back resource team. So it's who's in current, so you're driving the resource team.
Well, the reason we hold them back there very clearly is
no, I understand that, but I'd not come across that in terms of them jumping in with a resource team. So what you're
And it
saying,
happens very often. It's very
right,
common.
okay. No, we're not
Very,
I've not
very
used
common.
it.
No,
Okay.
don't use it. It's very common that a client who is used to self-soothing, is used to looking after themselves.
Right.
The client who is like that,
Okay.
very often they will move into fixer mode incredibly quickly.
Okay. So
And bring in their resource
bringing
team
them
too
back.
quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's
understood.
When the time is right to say, I wonder what the Dalai Lama might want to say, or I wonder that Aslan's got some. The resource team know what to do. Always, there's a wisdom that just comes through. You can trust that at the right point. Great. Let's move on. Tristan. Jennifer. We're going to go to you next, and then Tristan.
Hi. Yes. So I was thinking about what you said earlier about unlearning. So this is a client that I've been working with, not for too long, but we were doing EMDR and had started talking about some early childhood memories as, possible targets. Like this is before I started this training. But she's been coming in with just kind of something somatic, saying that she is feeling something here. This is a client who lived in family violence growing up. Mother was physically, emotionally abusive. Dad was very abusive towards mom, and she's now in a domestic violence relationship. So,
right. How old is she, and how long have you been seeing her?
I've been seeing her probably about 2 months now, and she's 56.
And she's in a relationship of domestic violence at this time, right?
Yes.
That's
Well, yes. And so she says it's emotional and verbal.
okay.
So she recently attempted to leave him, and then ended up getting back with him. And so what she's been sort of saying in session is, why do I keep choosing other people over myself?
Okay.
So she said, like, I felt really empowered. I was ready. I don't need him. I know I don't need him. I know he's not good for me. She's like, but the minute I see him crying, it's like I forget about me and I just choose him.
Right. Right. Before you go any further, Jennifer, what's your bridging point?
Well, so that's where I was confused, because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to bridge from that moment when she chose him, because it had just happened like a week
Can you
before.
just pause for a moment? Let's leap to a conclusion. Let's put it to the group.
Okay.
And I'm just going to repeat back. Probably you'll hear me front load somewhat the question, because actually this is a very interesting client. So I mean, she's got the capacity to observe her experience and say, what's happening here? I'm getting hooked in again, isn't she? She's saying. So to the team, to everybody, who would like to volunteer before Jennifer tells us what you actually did?
Yeah.
Where to bridge from? Because finding the appropriate bridging point is actually, I think, at the center. It's the single most important thing in the whole of attachment-informed EMDR, because it is the universe in a grain of sand, as William Blake, the poet, says. It is a moment that captures the whole story in one moment. Jamie, you're looking slightly knowing.
I think when she sees him cry, you said that's when everything
And
shifts.
why do you say that?
And that's an image.
What's that telling you?
Hold.
What's that already telling us about her formative story? Before we go anywhere in the past, what are we already knowing about her, what she experienced as a kid?
That it's her job to take care of other people's feelings and to make herself
and in
smaller.
particular, probably who?
Parents.
In
Dad,
particular, which
if there was
parent?
that DV.
I think it's
the father. You think it's the mother?
It's mother. I think it's mother. It's 99% certain it's mother.
Like seeing mom cry after there's been abuse. You think that's more the okay?
That's my speculation. Yeah. And right from the beginning. So when we bridge, the invitation to you all is to, I talk about radical curiosity. And it's not a left brain curiosity. It's a kind of felt multi-system curiosity. When I hope you all got that, as soon as Jennifer told us that story, oh, there it is. Oh, there's that sweet spot. And when you did you all get that? As soon as Jennifer said, when he cries, I'm pulled in, that's it. That's the piece. And that's so often true with domestic violence, by the way, because abusers, they are carrying their own horrendous wounds. On the one hand, there's, it's a two-sided coin. On one side of the coin, there's the abuse. On the other side of the coin is the victim, the abused, and the violence that was done to them, emotional and physical. So, that's what they're acting out. So they flip from being abusive to being incredibly vulnerable and needy. Yes, what? As sure as night follows day, that is, and it's going to be mostly mum, because the mother's emotional matrix, the signals that she radiates, that the infant picks up, that's the teaching, that's the learning, that's the experience, that's the filter through which everything is then subsequently filtered. Jennifer,
if it
take
was
us.
dad,
Yeah,
sorry, if it was dad, would it be more that she's activated when he gets big, loud, scary, something like that?
So
underneath it. So underneath it, it's going to be, and this is the key piece of my approach, and which can be misunderstood as blaming mothers. But underneath it, with every single child, because we're all born of a female body, and our primary regulatory relationship is with the feminine. Now, in the vast majority of families, that's going to be with the female, the literal female. In a same-sex parenting, we've got two blokes. It's going to be the one that has the female, that has the mothering, as it were. If it's in two females, a same-sex relationship with females, it's still going to be to one, the mothering of the two, that's going to be stronger than the other. So there's an incredibly intense infant pull reference to the mother. And the meaning that the infant makes, that the infant's nervous system makes of that experience, of literally whatever it is that's happening, is going to be filtered and moderated through the way the nervous system was programmed in the experience of mother, both observed and felt. So when the partner cries, it may be dad crying, could be dad crying. You could be bridging into that. But the reason that she's still triggered into the story is 99% certain because of mother's response to father's tears. So she may well have been cooked in a context of domestic violence where dad was in one moment physically and emotionally violent, and the next moment was crying. And how did mother respond to that? That's going to be true of a male or a female, particularly of a female, by the way, but also of a male. So it's getting right underneath it. Jennifer, am I making sense? I mean, everybody, am I making sense?
Yes, and this one is quite complicated. I was confused.
Okay.
So we
take us further.
We did bridge from that moment of her seeing him crying.
Good.
And where we landed on was her losing dad. And so I was like, okay,
losing dad.
Yes, this was 8 years ago. So she was still an adult.
So she's 56 now. Mm-hmm. And so it's her dad's death, you mean?
Yes, her dad's death.
So she bridged to the dad's death. So, right, okay, this is a good example.
Yes. So she bridged to dad's death. And I guess in my head, I was thinking, okay, like we haven't gone back far enough then. And so I kind of just, kept going. But then she went to mom's death, and she just kind of got stuck in like, I don't have parents anymore.
Okay.
And she has it. So she has very conflicting feelings towards mom because mom was physically and emotionally abusive towards her.
Right.
And in another,
can I just pause you just for a moment?
Yeah.
So her mom, well, how old was she when her mom died?
Mom died, I think, 4 years ago.
Okay. Has anybody heard in what Jennifer's saying the key piece that will get us into the childhood story that needs to be addressed? Did anybody pick out, there was a phrase that you used? I'll just repeat it.
She doesn't have parents anymore?
Yeah. Well, You don't need the anymore bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the anymore bit, who's talking? Who's conveying an experience when your client says, I don't have parents?
Her child self.
Yeah, because her little kid didn't have parents either. So you could catch that moment and say, what's her name? Can we, I'll try and remember it for next time.
We can name her Maria.
Maria, okay, our generic term. So what I would do, right or wrongly here, Jennifer, is, it's really intense. She's in this relationship. Why do I keep choosing? So, okay, your partner, he's crying. Have you got a picture? Yeah. Looking at that picture, your partner starts crying. What are you feeling? What did she say? What did she say?
She said that she was noticed. She the feelings were anger.
Just
And
take the first feeling, by the way.
okay.
So the way, don't let them talk. Don't let the buggers talk. Sorry, too much. So you slow it down, Jennifer. You slow it down. So Maria, close your eyes. Looking at your partner, violent as he is, and you're trying to get away. You're tempted to leave, and he cries. As you look at that, can you hear what I'm doing as well? I'm really, really relating. As he cries, looking at that, have you got a picture of him crying? The moment where you shift, with a moment where you want to leave, and then he cries, and it changes. When you connect with that one, that moment, looking at that picture, what are you feeling? I don't think anger, actually, if you do it well, I don't think it's going to be anger. I think it's going to be soft compassion, almost tenderness.
Well, the other one that she said was, sorry, I'm thinking of the translation in English.
What is it is it Spanish?
Mm-hmm.
What is it in Spanish?
In Spanish, it's pena o vergüenza, which could be embarrassment, but that's not really what it is.
Say it again slowly.
Shame. Thank you. Shame.
Great. Shame. That's great. That's great. Because the anger is already the response to the shame. The anger is a part at Meg, isn't it? That's a part stepping in, a manager part, angry part. Shame. Where are you feeling the shame in your body? Because there's an old friend. And what's the belief about yourself that goes with that? What did she say?
I guess I didn't catch the shame, but the belief was that it was like she's going to lose people. She was scared of losing people.
Okay, so I'm scared of losing. Yeah. And now we know straight away what that's telling us. That's the survival informed experience of the kid afraid of losing mother and therefore being eaten by hyenas. It's very, very, very deep. So if you catch that, the shame is the survival response, because shame keeps her bonded to primary caregiver, to mother. So you're right in there with a very, very young experience, Jennifer. So you've got a good place to bridge from. And I think where I'd invite you to have another go at this with her next time and say, perhaps, I've had a bit of a think about how we did that last time. Can we do this again? Because I think if you get it right, you won't snag on her dad's death or mum's death. I don't have parents. You won't snag on the way in. You're much more likely to bypass all of that, to go over the top and straight down into a childhood story. Am I making sense?
Yeah. And I think this one was just complicated because it was kind of like the anniversary of father's death. So I think that was fresh on her mind. There's just like a lot happening all at once. What
you could do is you could say, okay, so just thinking about your dad's death, without processing anything, just thinking what I would do. Just thinking of your dad's death, what's the picture there? And what might you have said?
Well, she started talking about the dreams that she had a month before he died, dreams that he was going to pass away.
Okay, so connecting with that, not to make clients wrong, connecting with that, when you fear of your dad dying, so you have the dream months before he does die. I don't use the term passing away. I always name it as a death. Look, connecting with that feeling, I suspect that that fear of losing a parent, losing your dad, losing a parent, is an old friend. If we were to go back a long way back to little Maria, all the way back to when you were a very small child, much smaller child, I wonder where we might land. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm stepping back from the rigidity of my protocol to find a way of just falling into, dropping into, because the story that she's re-experiencing is the need to look after her parents for fear of losing them. And she fears, it's not an intellectual fear, it's a visceral, survival-informed, early childhood fear of losing a parent, which she constantly did because the parents would be violent and angry, so she kept losing her parents.
Mm-hmm.
You with me?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're in.
Okay. Thank
Rebecca.
I have a question about that because I have a client, like what if for Maria, the death of her parent or her dad was traumatic? Would you want to clear that trauma out?
No, that's a really good idea. I would say, you know, but the thing is, the crying, she's in an abusive relationship yet again, you know, long old story of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, she needs to get away from that. You know, at the moment that is not resolved. She needs to find the courage to put a distance. That's why she's come to therapy, isn't it? Jennifer, am I right?
Yes. And Rebecca, I appreciate your question because her dad was actually murdered.
Right. That's a big level 1 experience. You need to do that. Have you processed that? Have you worked with that her dad was murdered? Well, what you might do there is you're on a sort of a parallel track. Whoa. Okay. So in fact, actually with somebody whose dad has been murdered and they're caught up in complexity, I might want to do a piece of straightforward level 1 processing, Jennifer, before I do any bridging. You know, so what if Maria comes in and says, I've had this horrendous experience this last week, I'm trying to leave, and yet my partner, he's violent, and then he cried, and then I lost it. And how many sessions have you had with her, did you say? 2 months.
Yeah, she's been in therapy for a while, but not with me.
Okay. So what I would do, again, all I can do is say what I would do, Jennifer, rightly or wrongly. I'd say, do you know what, Maria? Your dad's death, his murder is a really big one. And at the same time, we've got some old stories running. We've got some old patterns, some old friends that are stepping in, and you're getting hooked in again and again and again into violent relationships. And that's an old friend. You know, when your partner cries, I just name it. When your partner cries, you know, that's little Maria remembering the fear of, you know, your mum crying, your dad crying when you were small. That's pretty damn clear. We're going to have to go in and sort that out. I wonder whether, first of all, if there's anything burning, you know, maybe we need to just do a piece of straightforward trauma processing on your father's murder. That's a big one. Yeah, can you see what I'm doing there? I'm acknowledging that I'm doing both at the same time. My instinct would be, and then she might say, do you know what? I've done so much talking about my father's death, actually, in all the therapy I've had. Quite honestly, yeah, it's a big one. And then you could say, well, perhaps we could park that for the moment. And should we go sort little Maria out? Because clearly this is a story that little Maria wants to be known. That's why you're getting triggered. This isn't about your dad's murder. This is much, much younger. So I'm very transparent. Are you with me? Are you all with me in understanding why I do that? I really, you know, it's almost like contracting with the client and saying, you know, it's pretty clear they've got a lot of stuff running here. It's complex, but really deep down, this is little Maria desperately wanting to be met and understood, and for it to be made okay and for the spell to be broken that I'm still acting out. Jennifer, does that help? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That helps a lot.
Great. Can we move on? Tristan, can I come to you? I think you're on your usual treadmill. Is there a metaphor in there, Tristan, about you being on the treadmill?
No.
No.
I think for me, listening to everyone else has been super helpful. For myself, I haven't done essentially had, I guess now realize I messed up because I just did the bridging and I didn't do the resource team. So needing to go back, but I guess where I'm kind of stuck because I did the bridging. We talked about it. The client landed. It's the same client that I think I briefly spoke about last week. Well, one, they kind of landed at multiple memories, not a single one. So it was kind of a theme, and then we were able to narrow it down to one space. I think it was like a time when her mom was upset or projecting emotions onto her, something when she was a kid. We started processing it and didn't get back across the bridge or any of those things. So I think you've answered in some ways, but I guess I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how to pick back up. One, how to safely land on, like, how to get back on the other side of the bridge, but also how do you pick back up with I guess an incomplete target, but also it was an incomplete session.
Good question. When I just struck when you said multiple times, sort of you did it, okay, so you do the resource figures, get them in place just because you need them, you want to have them in the bank just in case. What did you remind us where you bridged from? What it is in the present that the client wants to shift? Remind us, especially for those of us. Because I've already seen the recording, but just remind us.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I more so spoke about a different client last time. But for this particular client, what she's wanting to work on, because we've been working for a while in general. It's the client that actually pushed me towards this particular training because attachment is always screaming, and I just don't know how to get in there. But with this particular client, there's a general idea or feeling that she's bad, and that it's her responsibility to like fix people's conflict, but her parents in particular. So the present day issue is that this dynamic continues to play out with her parents, where they can be emotionally manipulative, et cetera. They have high conflict in their marriage, and even though she's an adult who no longer lives with them, she continues to find herself like sucked in and feeling like it's her job to fix. So we bridge from.
What did you bridge from? The key moment, the sort of the one universe in a grain of sand moment.
And I think now I'm hearing folks, I think that's the piece where I'm confused because I asked her, is there a moment? Yeah, okay, now I got it. When I asked her like the memory and she started like replaying it and asked her to capture a specific moment. And I think it was when her mom started like crying and telling her, essentially started to emotionally dump on her.
Did you have a key, a clear moment anchored in space and time in the here and now where mum is doing her number, a classic number in the here and now? Did you have a particular moment? Really tight?
I think now that I'm listening, I think it could have been tighter.
And also, this is a big point to everybody. Even though mum crying and dumping her emotions, it's an absolutely perfect place to bridge from. You still want to spend a bit of time find what is it? What is the moment that has the maximum charge? So is it because you see, it could be when she looks at her mother and she thinks, oh Christ, mum's just about to do her number again. It might be the very first word that mother uses. It might be the point at which mother burst into tears. You see, that experience of the mother crying, dumping her emotions already consists. It's a bit like actually Shapiro's protocol for recent traumatic events is actually quite useful. You've got sort of worst, first, last. where you've got an intense experience that's got juice in the here and now. And this was a protocol crafted for nasty things that are happening on the outside. But you've got a kind of, you've got an experience of mothers crying and dumping her emotions, which is also made up of several distinct moments. Which is the moment that triggers her most intensely? You with me? It's worth spending a bit of time just running that moment, and drop into it and be, Christian, be dead curious in your tone of voice as well. So remind me of her name. I haven't got my notes with me because I'm in Denver, not in Sheringham. My physical notes I didn't bring with me.
Yeah, we can say Anne.
Anne, okay. So actually, I'll tell you what, can you just role play this for me, and I'll just illustrate sort of what I might do. Would that be useful to do it like that? Yep. Yeah. Hang on a second. If you heard that, that was my watch talking to my smartphone. Okay, Anne. So, what's bugging you today? What we're going to work with you? I must fix people. I'm bad. And it's just mum, she's doing it, she's still doing it, and she's dumping her emotions, she's crying. That's what you tell me. So, Anne, if you just run that story of your mum the last time, just, I don't know, yesterday, just in the here and now, can you just tell me a bit more about where are you, exactly what's happening? At what point mum starts doing her number?
Driving home from work. My mom and I usually talk on the way home from work. So driving home from work, and if I'm
So you're driving, who's driving?
Anne. So if I'm Anne, I'm driving home from work and on the phone with mom. So the client.
Oh, you're on the phone with mum, right?
And
you all hear how important this is, by the way? You're in a transitional space. Anne's in a transitional space. She's on. Mum isn't physically there, so it's her voice. So okay, so you're in the car. You're driving home from work, and do you talk to mum often, pretty much every day, or is this regular, or does she ring you? Do you ring her?
Pretty much every day, and it's usually mom ringing me, but I'll ring back to avoid any conflict about me not reaching out.
Okay. So do you ring back from the car, or how do you do that?
I'm trying to think what the client said. Yeah. So if I'm Anne, I.
So you're driving home. Mum calls yet again. Typical mum. You don't take the call?
I take this call. When I'm free, I'll take the calls. So I took the call, and she instantly goes into some tiff she had with dad.
Okay, so she starts talking on the car speaker, or you're on the hands-free in the car. So she's in the car. Her voice is in the car. What do? You say I'll talk to you later.
Nope, I just let her talk.
What was the piece about? I'll ring back. I just want to be clear.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. No, the ring back piece. I think I was saying when she misses the call, she's sure to ring back because she doesn't want any conflict.
Okay.
We're not calling back.
Right. So you've got two things here. So there's two possibilities here. You're driving home from work. So this is exactly what I would do. I'm doing this for real. I'm really spending some time to find this moment. Because can you all hear? There's so many potential things going on. Meg, you've got a whole cast of parts waiting to step in, haven't you? So Anne, driving home from work, on one occasion, you take the call and your mum goes off on one about some problem she's got. This is typical her. On another occasion, she calls, you miss the call, and you feel the urge to ring back as quickly as possible to avoid, being accused of not reaching out. Got it? Of those two, which has the biggest charge?
The former, mom calling and dumping, like going into
He's dumping,
whatever
right?
issue.
So when you run that story, you're driving home from work, Are you already anticipating mum calling?
Yep.
Okay. And then she does.
Mm-hmm.
And what's that like when she does? Your heart sinks?
Um, hmm. Doesn't sink, but I take a breath, like just to kind of prepare because I know
You
it's probably
steel
going.
yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then she comes on and there she goes. Typical mum doing her number.
Mm-hmm. Specifically about the dad. Like it's specifically
Okay, don't
her
worry
ranting.
about in
Okay.
the sense I'm not too worried about what it's about. It's just mum doing her number. Can you all hear the childhood story? It's not just an event, it's a whole, this is a marinade, isn't it? So Anne is re-experienced. How old is Anne?
Anne is 27.
27. She doesn't live with her parents anymore, but her mother is still using her big time for emotional regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So can you all hear, you Tristan, here in this point, working with Anne, you've got a number of choice points about where you bridge from. You probably can't go wrong, but can you see what I've done here? I've really spent a bit of time unpacking the experience because we've got both the trigger moment where little Anne in big Anne's body, 27-year-old Anne's body, thinks, oh shit, here we go again. There's an urge to make mum okay, to sort of ring back as quickly as possible. There's a shutdown that when mum starts off, there's an urgency to try and make mum okay. There are so many different points. And this is such a good example, and it's so difficult to teach. You, Tristan, having worked with Anne already, you will know, feel, intuit what her fundamental childhood, survival response story is. Yeah. What's your gut feeling as her therapist? What particularly intense childhood drama is being reactivated in this experience of her mum phoning her in the car?
This is, like you said, for sure, old friends at play. Her life story, high conflict between parents.
So what is it? Yeah, what is it? So what is your instinct if you were to, her child's experience of mum's drama? Which is the key dysfunctional part that's still running?
She feels
I need to fix.
Yep.
I feel responsible.
Same. Fix response, but she uses the word particularly like it's my job to fix it.
Okay, so funny enough here, as you unpack it, you could say, and Tristan, the trouble is it's so hard to teach one size fits all, because in this moment, you're sort of teasing out, you could actually use a negative cognition. You could say here, it's breaking all my rules. You could say, Anne, that urge to fix, I'm responsible for mum's well-being. As you run that story of her telephoning you in the car, which is the moment where that story just fires in, kicks in, absolutely it's like a vicious kick in the backside or the gut. I've got to fix her. Which would it be?
The moment she mentions dad's name and becomes tearful or starts crying.
Okay, there's your point. So she's on the phone, right now. Just as mum tips into talking about dad, close your eyes, and as you hear her speak, that moment where she mentions dad, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling? What's the belief about yourself that goes on? Drop back in time, go back as far as you can, first place you land. I mean, then you do obviously a little bit more delicately than that. So a question to you, Tristan, and then to everybody else. Can you see just how important that is and the difference that would make?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that there's every chance you'll bypass a lot of the clutter, the noise, the fossil memories and so on. You'll get in, you'll be right in a story, and you're in image, emotion, body, belief, little you're almost certainly in a formative, root formative experience in an RFE.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then work with it as best you can, come back out, and then you make reference. You're in the car now, and your mum, it's interesting actually. My temptation, I have to say, Tristan, my temptation would be to bridge from her urge to ring back so as not to get into trouble. Because that's the urge. That's the night, Jim Knight. You bridge from the level of urge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because by the time she's taken the call and is in the discussion, and she starts talking about dad, it's a perfectly legitimate place to go from. But even deeper than that is the urge to just a visceral, collective, whatever it is. Mum's called, I missed the call. Oh shit, I got to ring back. I'm responsible for her well-being. I'm going to ring her back.
Okay.
Let's open it out. We've only got a few more minutes. We're 8 minutes to go today. And let's just open this one out. Tristan, questions?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, so then in terms of coming back, so like you said, you would come out of it, not switch back, but you would go back to like the moment in the car, for example, and then you'll close out, like you work around closing out there. Or?
Your closing out would be your future template. So
okay.
Maybe you shifted just a tiny little bit. Okay. So next time your mum calls, is that going to be different?
Let's say she says, yeah.
Well, I mean, with any luck, you'll have had a positive cognition emerging from the childhood story where, I can put a boundary down.
Okay.
Olga, you're just reminding me. Тебе немножко трудно все говорить по-английски, но все ясно. How are you doing, Olga? Would you like to?
Более не менее.
More or less.
Comme ça, and I will review with later.
What I would love to do, Olga, at some point, let's have just you and me. По-русски мы поговорим. Я стараюсь отвечать немножко на твои вопросы. So I'll try and answer some questions separately in Russian at some point. Обязательно. Сделаем это, yeah?
Спасибо.
Делаем.
Thank you very much.
Потому что я думаю, что у тебя есть вопросы и опыт тоже. Okay.
Thank you.
Give me a call. I mean, drop me an email and let's fix that. So just opening it out. Meg, you've been nodding enthusiastically at points.
Nodding enthusiastically and writing as fast as I can and listening as much, all the things. Wonderful.
Making sense. It's sort of cutting through things.
Absolutely. Making very wonderful sense. Thanks.
And what I hope is with your understanding of parts, you can ask the parts to sort of play the game, step back, step in as appropriate. What do you remember? It absolutely fits with your parts approach.
Yes, these three things are going to be so beautiful together. That's why I wanted to really try to take this class and learn how to meld this. And I think they're going to do wonderful. Thanks.
Great. Stuart, let's go around.
I'm muting. What was the question? I was listening.
Briefly, questions, thoughts before we're done today on how useful this was?
Oh, very useful. It's clarified a lot of things, and that I'm getting that precise moment, helping with resources, and just sharpening up the process so they can keep on practicing.
Great, and we'll see each other in the group as well, in the supervision group. So, Jamie, how's it been for you today?
So I'm just remembering like that, choosing the exact right target or trigger or that bridging moment has always been the trickiest part for me. I think it just takes a lot of work. It's so nuanced. So just to comment on that, but I also just want to ask a question. So we're in this phase 4 process today. So I think I understand the reveal and the repair pretty well. I just want to double check the rewire. Is that just the bilateral stimulation or was there more to that piece?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yusra and I were talking about this earlier today. Repair, rewire are basically the same thing.
Okay.
I didn't want to just say repair or just rewire. because I wanted to use the word repair, because we're talking about
Yeah.
rupture and repair. I mean, repair is the whole, we're finding the ruptures that weren't repaired and we're repairing.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
holding a space where they do repair. That's the whole point. So, but then rewiring is the neurobiological experience of the nervous system.
Okay.
Great.
I just wanted
Jennifer.
to make sure there wasn't more. Thanks.
Final thought for today?
This was, yeah, no, thank you. It was really helpful in just thinking about very complicated clients and kind of knowing where to go, where to start. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is like, I think I was maybe looking for a picture of a child, but what I heard in when we were talking is like listening for that child self, not necessarily looking for an image.
You want a place anchored in space and time where that kid is having an experience. The picture is not necessarily of the child. The picture is of the context, the story, the child in a story, as it were. And often the child's not actually there. It might even be an empty bedroom or something. Yeah. And I think the piece that I'm left with from your story is the importance of recognizing what is a level 1 that needs targeting and sorting in its own right, and what is the level 2, the deeper underneath the big T traumas, even the small T traumas. Christian, we okay with you? Because this was your, I think we've just about ticked your boxes.
I think this is a quick question, but not in detail, but I guess like, so then picking back up on the next session, I know you said you don't need to go back to all of those pieces. So if I have it correctly in the next session, I would ask how, if assuming this all went well or whatever, like in the next, to pick up, you would ask how little self feels, and then you would just start process. I guess I'm confused on how you start
that's the session structure piece, coming back to at the beginning of those 3 slides that I showed on session structure. The way I do this is I would say to Anne, good to see you again. Yeah. How's your week been? Anything big? How you doing? Just to open a question. Right. Before we get going, just a quick question. So obviously you've had, sounds like it's been some good things, but difficult this week, still a bit. Just before we start anything, just want to check in on the work we did last week, the specific work, if it hasn't come up already. When we go back to, that telephone call from mum and where it went to, where it took us. So both the trigger moment and where it took us to little Anne. How is that now? It's as simple as that. How is that now? And she'll say, well, you could say, well, how's it been with the calls with mum this week in the car? How's that been going? Has it been feeling a bit different? And if she says, well, it's still been really difficult, you might say, perhaps we need to just pick up from where we left off. That little Anne story, you can sort of dance around with it and sense where the juice is. So then you might rebridge from a new experience of the week. You could pick up where you left off last week. Basically, it's the same thing, probably. Because it's
so if there's a charge, you do need to reactivate so that you can process.
You definitely want to reactivate. That's the reevaluation, classic phase 8 EMDR. You want to check in. How is it? Because it may, stuff may have happened in the interim where that's now much better than it was. Yeah. I wrote him. I'm going around my screen. Going around your screen, I mean.
Yeah, no, I'm taking a lot. I think another thing, going back to the client that I mentioned and something that you said that clicked, it wasn't a big traumatic event, like kind of like it was just, it was just a little event, but that really the client still carries with her.
Speaks to the story. Yeah.
Right.
Very often.
Right.
Attachment informed EMDR is often working with stories that do not look traumatic on the outside, and they're not even small teams.
Right. And I think that's a key difference, because I think where we're coming out of basic EMDR training, we're looking for these big traumatic events, and it doesn't have to be like that.
But also we can carry on talking about this over lunch, which is rather nice.
You're over time, by the way, Mark. Some people might have sessions.
If you need to go. I just want to make sure that Rebecca and Jutta have just got a brief moment. Rebecca. Was that useful
Yeah,
for you?
no, I think this is very helpful. Just based on Tristan's question. So then you ask, oh, how did it go? And there's still some issues there. Then you can bridge back from a new, like once you get the
You
juice
could do a full,
back.
you could do a full new bridge. You just have to make a judgment in there. Do we pick up where we left off from last week? Because the target may still be incomplete, but if it's a childhood formative story that's running all the time, the fact that that target isn't complete, of course, it's not going to be complete because there are so many other ones as well. It's a whole childhood. You're just working your way through. Ultimately, where you want to get to is look back on the childhood you had. It's not really been about desensitization. It's about linking stuff up and being able to say, yeah, that's the past. This is now. I can move forward. Your turn. Quick final one, then we're done.
Yeah, this was very interesting. I think what it also showed in the things that were presented, it's always about the dynamic, the relational dynamic, that the bridging goes back to for the attachment informed work.
Well
if you go back to a level 1, you might go back that a sibling died or the mother died or so. Then obviously you work with it as a level 1 trauma or experience. But other than that, there will also be dynamic around it, a family dynamic, whether it was talked about or whether it was metabolized or whatever. So having rather the event, so shifting from an event-based focus to an experience-based focus, that's really what this attachment-informed work and
that's nicely summarized. We'll call a halt there. Olga, будем говорить. And Stuart, we'll see you no doubt before long. But next week, we meet next week anyway, and we do part 4. Okay, Meg, lovely to see you, and see you next week.